In talking is something that is very close to math hearts, I should say, because we've been doing the research for 8 years in a row. So it's probably part of our DNA by now to go and check the consumer trust and take the pulse of what is happening. But I mentioned it yesterday, I will mention, some of you are new, we've now added 2 more streams to the consumer trust studies. So we don't just check what consumers think, it's now what enterprise think of data and personal data. And we are planning, well, we'll come back with Michael on the working group on that, but we're planning to introduce a specific this year question, so another third surveys on mobile network operators. If you're a member of MEF and you take part in the working groups, or if you want to take part in the working groups, do remember that these are the ones that test anything we want to put out there in terms of surveys, etc. So be part of a debate and tell us what's going to happen. I see some of the people are coming back with some of the coffees, nicely caffeinated, ready to go. Yeah, I see. Oops, something happened there. But there is time for me to passing the baton to Michael for the introduction. Michael, all yours.
Well, fantastic. Thank you very much, Dario. So as Dario said, we've been conducting now, or the MEF has been conducting for the last 8 years, a consumer trust study that looks at the perceptions of people's and their attitudes at the intersection of personal information and trust across 10 markets worldwide. The last 4 years, Assurant has been underwriting that study, and we'll be talking about that briefly. So let's just jump right into it. Oh, and then one other thing is do scan the QR code and give us some feedback on how the event's going and what you want to do for the future. And then likewise, personal data and identity working group. If you're an MEF member, join us and do this research that we're doing here, or if you're not a member, join and help us continue this going forward. But with that in mind, let's start. Craig Thole, you want to briefly introduce yourself? And
sure, happy to. Again, as he just said, I'm Craig Thole. I am with Assurant, and for those of you that may not be familiar with Assurant, we are a protection and business services company that is focused on primarily protecting what are typically the largest financial transactions in a consumer's life, whether that's their home or their flat, as they might say over here, their automobile, the technology that's in there as part of their life, including their smartphones, and an increasing smartphones, especially being an increasing part of the technology in the size of those transactions that are in a consumer's life. And so our portfolio protection goes beyond protection, which I'll touch on a little bit. But typically we'll say we're one of the largest companies nobody's ever heard of because we are a B2B2C business. And so while we are focused on delivering products and services that solve real consumer problems in the marketplace, we deliver those services through our client, the middle B in that scenario. And so it's typically about their brand, not our brand, in delivering products and services that help them enhance their brand, deliver more value to the consumers. And so a lot of times our products are even white labeled, so we don't even show up until you kind of dig under the covers to understand that that's Assurant. But we're a global company, almost 16,000 employees, Fortune 500. We play in pretty much every region on the globe today and deliver products and services through all of the largest brands around the globe as well that most people are very familiar with. And so our mission statement is to help consumers thrive in a connected world. And so my role there is delivering and leading a product portfolio that is the development, delivery, and in-market operational performance of those products that enhance that primary line of business and across those lines of business that we play in, and adding value through mobile applications, web applications, premium technical support, which spans the scope of all connected devices, in a sort of a white glove technical support experience, because it's about not just protecting these devices financially, but protecting the data on these devices, protecting the transactions that are flowing through those devices, and now really extending to protecting the individuals themselves, which is, I'll touch on a little bit more as we talk about the data and how we've played and used the data to help evolve our own product portfolio. So thanks for
and,
having us.
And just to be clear on that, so people are aware of it. So I briefly touched on it yesterday. It's that stage of development where the first stage is help me protect myself, and then it's help me get insight in action, and then ultimately help me on the value exchange of my data. Right. And so when you talk about protection, because it took me a while when I was working with Assurant what that really meant. It basically meant, as Andrew Budd was saying, when I drop my phone in the toilet and I break it, you're there to help replace it for me. That's the first layer of protection.
The first layer.
The next layer of protection is help that device be optimized and have it running and performing properly. The next layer is back up all that data, like the apps and such, and my photos that are on that device. And then the next layer is what actually you've been exhibiting here in the show, is the Pocket Geek privacy that helps me collect my data, manage my credentials, block my data, those kinds of things.
Yeah, absolutely. The only other thing I might add is just not supporting just only from a troubleshooting perspective, but also education, onboarding to devices, helping them get more out of the devices, because as these devices get smarter and smarter and you can do more and more, people really touch a fraction of those capabilities. And so our focus, that's why we call it a white glove experience. It's not just troubleshooting when you have an issue, it's about getting the most that you can out of the technology in your life. And again, OEM agnostic, platform agnostic, all of our solutions in how we play and operate are focused that way.
And it's really any IoT device in my life, not just my phone.
Yes.
And then one last question before we move on. Why'd you underwrite the study?
Well,
or do you want to touch? Let's
yeah,
touch on that later.
We'll talk about the data.
Let's
I
go
think
over
it'll
to
be a
jump
good
over to
segue to talk
So
about
Julian, CEO of DigiMe, been in this industry, one of the earlier visionaries in the industry. So yeah, tell us about it.
So I introduced myself this morning, but I'll do it briefly again. So founder of DigiMe, we help individuals get a full copy of their data across all domains: health, wearables, finance, social, media. Have it in their own library or vault, whatever you want to call it, decentralized, and then enable any business or service to ask them for that data. And that means that services can get more and better data than they would otherwise get, because it's from the individual, and it's quick, easy, and very cost effective to do it, and it's private, secure, and consented. So we're leading the way on the new personal data side. It's still early days, despite the fact that I've been doing it for 10 years. But it is now actually happening with major brands moving forward. So we'll talk about that.
And finally, but not least, Barbara Langer, who is the CEO and founder of Insight Angels, and absolutely angelic. I've worked with her now for 3.5, 4 years on doing data research, and I've learned more about people worldwide through this lens than I ever thought possible. So tell us a little about what you're doing.
Sure. So hi, everyone. Great to be here. I work for Insight Angels, as Michael said, and we're a market research consultancy based out of Hertfordshire, UK, and we operate globally. My specialism is consumer insights in a variety of industries and sectors, but particularly mobile and online and retail services.
Okay. And can you briefly touch on, you introduced, or you and I introduced about 1.5 years ago, 2 years ago, a new sentiment element analysis. Are you going to be showing that in today's data? People's emotional statements?
Oh, no, I can reference it though.
Yeah, so why don't you reference that too if you can.
I will mention.
So with that in mind, please.
Sure.
So what you're going to get now is a sneak peek into the 8th Annual Consumer Trust Study, and the actual final report will be coming out in June. So be sure to go to the MEF website and request your copy and get early access to it. But let's get the sneak peek.
Great, thank you. Hope you can all still hear me on the other mic. So just a brief overview of what the study is, in case you're somehow not familiar with it, but it's a 10-market study where we look at behaviours and attitudes as they relate to privacy, security, and trust among consumers, among smartphone users. And, and we fielded it this year in February and March. We have 650 respondents per market, so we are able to look at individual markets, but we also look at an aggregate level, and that's a pretty chunky sample size to be able to look at and start to spot some trends. The report, this is a preview today of some of the insights that are emerging, and the report itself will be released next month. Just to briefly mention something else that will be released next month and is slightly special and different this year is that we've run an additional study among US college students, a special cohort, additional interviews. 1,000 US college students were interviewed in February with the same kinds of questions, so that will also be coming out soon, just to make you aware. Given that the study's been running for a fair few years, I thought it might be interesting to just briefly take a look back over the last few years and give a bit of a potted history of some of the things that we've been observing, some of the things we've been seeing. So back in 2018, the MEF report that year was called The Grand Awakening. And that was really when we were starting to see trust being much more top of mind for consumers, and actions that they might need to take being more top of mind. Data scandals were bringing that to the fore. They were hitting corporate trust. There was also new regulation that was putting it in the spotlight as well. And we really felt that that year was a big tipping point. A number of users worldwide were telling us that they had taken action to protect themselves, protect their personal data for the first time in the recent months. The following year, our report was called Trust in the Spotlight, and we were seeing an increase in people taking protective actions even from the year before. But at the same time, users perceiving not that much benefit, or being very unclear about the benefit that they were getting, the value equation there. And in actual fact, a number of indicators of trust appeared to be in decline or not advancing, either stable or in decline. There was also evidence of revenue loss because users were telling us that they were refraining from downloading apps, or they were even in some cases deleting apps where they were feeling a bit uneasy about how companies, services, organizations were going to look after their data. The most recent report, before the one that's about to be launched, we called Time to Serve the Individual. And here's where we started to try to break down consumers in the market into segments, as Michael just alluded to. So we wanted to understand the spectrum of attitudes and behaviors that there were in a sort of accessible, intuitive way. We identified 6 different segments in terms of attitudes to risk and level of protective actions that people were willing to take. And the key thing there really was that there was one key segment that was the largest one across the world, in almost every market actually, and certainly globally, and that was what we called the impaired. And those were people who were actually taking quite a number of actions to try to protect their data, but still feeling very much at risk, and that was a big theme. This year, really a theme emerging is incremental change. We are seeing actually some positive improvements for the first time in some areas of perceptions around privacy, around security, and around control, which I'll highlight in just a moment. And the level of actions being taken is still pretty high, although it's a bit fragmented. And we are seeing that users are still, even now, unclear about the benefit. And there's a lot more work to do to address their fears and their notions of risk. So the first actual data I wanted to share from this year's study is around perception. So we ask a number of statements on an agree scale, and this is the aggregate global data. A lot of these statements relate to confidence in my ability to stay safe online, feeling like companies I deal with are going to look after me in terms of keeping my data secure, respecting my privacy. And we also have a benchmark statement in there, which is around convenience and ease of use. And that's always an interesting one to look at, because we just see that it's so much higher, and it gives us a sense of, what good might look like. So we see 71% of our global smartphone users who agree that apps and services are convenient and easy to use, but far, far less are able to endorse things like mobile apps and services respecting my privacy, feeling in control, keeping my data secure, things like that. That said, as I just mentioned, there have actually been some significant improvements in some of those areas. As you can see, the change since 2020 column on the right-hand side there. For example, we see a 6-point increase in feelings of being in control about how my data is used by mobile apps and services. A 5-point increase in mobile apps and services respecting my privacy. So that's really encouraging, but still more than half of users are not able to agree with those kinds of statements. So there's definitely a lot of work to do, but a sense that perhaps things are starting to move in a better direction. We also did a little bit of digging in to try to understand where those improvements are coming from. Are there particular markets or demographics which are driving that change? And the key lens that was most important was market rather than demographic or platform or anything else. We've just picked 3 of the statements there: being in control, apps respecting my privacy, and apps keeping my data secure. And we're looking here in the numbers at the numbers which are points of increase or decrease in one case in the UK. And really, we see an increase almost everywhere, a moderate increase almost everywhere apart from UK. But where we see the biggest increases are in South Africa, and to a slightly lesser extent, Brazil and China. So really interesting that we see some markets particularly driving those overall global perception changes.
And just to point out there real quick, I think we also correlated that to recent regulation introductions.
Yeah, exactly. I was about to say, those are markets where there have been regulatory developments in the last couple of years, and at the time of the last fieldwork and subsequent to them. So it could well be that those regulations are supporting some of these perception improvements, which would be very encouraging. One of the things we look at, and we've looked at actually for the first time in this kind of way this year, is confidence in different types of organisations in terms of the transparency with which they deal with personal data. And what we actually see is quite a wide disparity in terms of how much people feel confident, how much they trust different organisation types to look after their data and to be clear about what's going to happen to it. So doctors and hospitals and banks and credit card companies are the most trusted in terms of transparency. But at the bottom end of the scale, you see a real mixture there in terms of those people who feel confident and those people who feel much less confident, for social media companies in particular, as well as mobile apps and services. And actually looking at that by market, we see quite a bit of consistency there. Social media companies tend to be in the bottom three in terms of trust and transparency across every single market apart from Japan. So definitely some work to do for social media companies in particular, or those who might regulate them. One of the new things we've looked at this year as well is some of the newer developments in the technology world. So we presented a few different statements here and just tried to get a gauge of how people felt in terms of, is this generally a positive thing? Is it generally, I'm not sure, or it's a negative thing, or I just don't know enough about it? And we understood that many people will not have necessarily a great understanding of these things, but it was more just to sort of dip a toe in the water and gauge how people were feeling. So the types of statements we included were around mobile number intelligence for verification of identity. We also looked at virtual reality, artificial intelligence, and mobile wallets, just to get that gauge. And in all cases, I think the key thing here is, in all cases, only a minority are able to say, yes, I feel positive about that. The majority are it's a mixed bag of, oh, I'm not sure, or I don't really know enough about it, or in some cases actually feeling negative, but more it's just that perhaps they don't know enough about it. And the most negativity was expressed towards artificial intelligence in particular, but there's also the least understanding of that as a concept. There's also some differences by market there as well, which will be in the full report. Particularly, we see that in Germany and India. So quite interesting there. But just something we wanted to explore, because this is something that's obviously changing the environment for people and the way they might feel about sharing their data in future. One of the things we look at in every report is level of protective actions people are taking, and in the full report there is also the detailed actions, a list of actions, and we can have a sense of what people are doing and what things are really driving them to take action. And since 2018, we have seen an increase in those who are taking preventative steps, things like changing their settings, things like installing antivirus software. So it's great to see at an overall level quite a high proportion, the vast majority now, are doing something. That said, are they feeling safer? Maybe a bit. We've got about 52% of people who say they feel slightly safer. It's not a ringing endorsement, and actually only 1 in 4 say that they feel a lot safer. And these these proportions just haven't changed since we started looking at this. So there's a sense of needing to do stuff, doing lots of stuff, maybe doing a few fragmented actions, but not having a sense that this really adds up to feeling safe, feeling protected. And one of the reasons for that may well be that data harm remains pretty prevalent, and actually some forms of data harm or exposure to risk and data harm are increasing. So we asked this question of, have you ever experienced any of these things? For example, unsolicited messages, spam, fraudulent emails, fraudulent texts, so attempts to steal data, but also some more serious things further down the list, such as identity theft and account hacking, those kinds of things. And unfortunately, we are seeing some increases in some of these areas, particularly in the things that are already top of the list. So those spam messages and this phishing and smishing that's going on, these have increased significantly in actually quite a short amount of time. I think one of the speakers alluded to it earlier, that during lockdown, perhaps fraudsters have had to find new ways of trying to con people, essentially, and this may be partly driving these kinds of increases. So people are aware of these risks, and it is affecting a high proportion. And then just to touch on a teeny bit of broader context, this was also touched on in another presentation, but there is certainly a sense that the pandemic has led to a shift in how people are using their mobile phones and the amounts which people are using their mobile phones. So the majority here, 62%, said that they were using their mobiles more as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic. And we were also able to track the activities that they're doing and compare that to the last few years. And actually it's entertainment where people are really increasing their frequency of mobile usage, mobile consumption. So social media, music, gaming, video content have all increased in not necessarily penetration, but certainly in frequency. People are doing these a lot more, spending more time on these activities. We are seeing increased penetration as well for some more functional types of activities, such as mobile shopping, food ordering, and also payments. And we've got some really good insights on payments, and that will be in the full report as well. So just to sort of bring that together and wrap that up in terms of the key points, as I've just said, the pandemic does seem to have shifted behaviours. It's made mobile more of an epicenter, more of a one-stop shop, perhaps, and people are potentially more reliant on it than they ever have been. We've seen some improvements in perceptions around privacy, security, and control in some markets, in most markets, in fact. But where the biggest increases have been also happens to be where regulation has come in over the last couple of years, so could well be contributing to those positive movements. That said, still much room for improvement. Over half of the global smartphone user population were not able to endorse sentiments like, I feel like mobile apps and services are going to respect my privacy, keep my data secure. So definitely a lot of work still to do. In terms of those tech developments, we've seen things like artificial intelligence leaving a lot of users quite uncertain, not understanding what it's all about, what it might mean for them. There's definitely a need for some education there as those things become more in the spotlight. And a continuing sense, as we've seen in the past, but has not improved, unfortunately, that users don't really have true confidence that the actions they take are really going to make them feel safer, linked to the data around harm that people are exposed to and that they're continually aware of. So possible lessons for the industry, which I'll just run through quickly because I think it would be great to just get into the discussion, really. Regulation matters. Obviously, people are not feeling really well equipped to necessarily champion themselves and protect themselves. So regulation clearly has a role to play, and we see some really great increases in perceptions where there has been regulation coming in recently. I do think it's a prime moment for education, given that users are really recognising that they are using their mobile phones more now as a result of the pandemic. They're also starting to see some shifts. Data that I haven't shown today was around, do you feel better educated by enterprises in terms of equipping you, giving you options to to inactual personal data rights. And actually, there's some good improvements there too. So there's some positive shifts woven throughout the report. So it does feel like perhaps the time is now to start doing more of this. People will be responsive to it, perhaps more than they have been in the past. A need to build trust in tech developments because people are feeling unsure about what those are about. So definitely a need for education there. And then not forgetting social media. Social media, I shared one data point today around transparency and how there's a lack of confidence that social media companies will use personal data in a transparent and clear way and sort of be honest about that. But there are actually other data points that point in the same direction, that there is a particular problem for social media companies. So there's certainly a need for governments, regulators, maybe the social media companies themselves to address that as a priority. Let's discuss.
Yeah, so fantastic. So with that in mind, in the wonderful. And the larger report's a beast. It's about 60, 70, 80 pages, something like that. It's a tremendous amount of data. So, Craig, one quick question for you. Great data, pretty exciting. So what? I mean, so as an executive of a company, when you look at data like this, let's turn it into insight. What does this mean to you? How do you use it? How do you help make decisions on it for your company?
Yeah, for us, it's really valuable. I'll actually start with just, I think the partnership with the MEF is in itself valuable for us to have insights to the industry, engage with players in the industry, see what's coming, see what's around the corner, and our goal is always to be, from a product perspective, is to be skating where the puck is going, not where the puck is, and the partnership gives us the opportunity to have some of those insights to help us do that. How we got motivated to focus on this trust study, which, as you said, is 8 years running, where we sponsored the last 4 years, is several years prior to that, we had made a decision to again extend the role that we play in protecting and supporting and optimizing consumers as they navigate their connected lives, digital lives, and so we knew we were working on a product that was in that space that I'll touch on, but the ability to leverage those insights, consumer sentiments, and how those consumer sentiments are changing, not only broadly, but also because it's a 10-market study, even at individual region level. Because I mentioned earlier, we're a global company. We play in all regions around the globe, and so the opportunity to also take that data and apply it, in a regional perspective, in a way that's meaningful is very valuable. And so, how we do use it is actually helped us, guide the evolution of our product in some ways, in terms of understanding, the sentiment, how are people thinking about things, the trust that they have, the expectations that they have of a product that is intended to help them protect themselves in their digital lives, and then going beyond that is the data that comes out of that helps us position the product and position it not only in our business of selling through the middle client. So we have to first sell to the middle client to get the opportunity to then present our products to the end consumer, but how we talk about it, how we position the product and sell it into our clients, and then ultimately how we position product, and communicate the value proposition of the product to the consumers themselves. So understanding where those those pain points are and the things that they are concerned about, and how we can potentially address those areas of concern has had tremendous value. And again, the evolution of the product, positioning of the product, selling the product, and now we're live in the market with this product that helps us actually communicate the value proposition to the consumers in a way that hopefully will resonate with them and help them understand that this is something that can help them in their digital lives.
Yeah, and Julian, let's skip to you real quick. So I think Craig hit on something really important, value, right? And you've talked about that a lot, because a lot of tech companies, luckily Assurant's not one of them, they don't lead with this is what it does. They lead with this is what it does for you. And you've got some really good insights on that. So maybe you could share.
Yeah, so there's two sides in the study, and the study's been great over the years and seeing the evolution. There's the protection side, what you're talking about, and it's quite clear that consumers are starting to get used to the protection, whatever, but they're still worried about what it actually achieves. Right? Now, I'm on the do more side. I'm on the let's go out and share even more data side, right? And because we've got to. and I mentioned that this morning, personal health and all sorts of personalization and things that we can do. So you'd think from this that users would be really therefore the so what, I want my data, I want to be more in control and do it. The problem is users aren't, right? It's one thing the study will show you is that users are sort of uncertain. What the hell's going on? I don't understand. And trying to educate the community before they take an action is never going to work. We've seen this time and time again. They have to be educated through doing new things. So what is going to pull all of these people into this new world, the Blue River we talked about this morning? And, we tried, and I've looked at, going back quite a few years, about getting users to care about their data and then moving forwards with that. They just won't. Doesn't matter how much you do it. The slight exception of health, where actually seeing your health data matters. But if you take that exception aside. And the only way it's going to happen is use cases which, because it's human-centric, allows you to share more data than you would do before. And then that will pull people into the new ecosystem and from there. Now, to make that happen, when you get to the boundary, some business is saying, hey, I can do this new thing for you, keep you alive, change your life, do whatever it may be. Obviously, at the point they have to make the decision, that consent, it's got to be really clear. And you've got to really focus on making consent and making it very clear in one page. Mm-hmm. So we've put a lot of effort into that, and that comes from the study, right? Yep. So that they will then cross that boundary, they'll press the button, they're clear on what it is and everything else. But even then, and we see this, they haven't necessarily really cottoned on in their mind that they've owned and controlled it. Second time, maybe, third time. So there's a little gap between now and, a year or whatever else. We might see that in next year's study or the year after's, before they start to realize that they've actually started stepping in and taking control. Yeah. So the so what for me is the fact that it's down to businesses. You can get more data than you think, right? If you adopt the new methodology. You've really got to be clear, though, on what you're doing, that consent step. And we have a whole consent certificate designed for this clarity. And then once you've done that, you can keep asking for more and more data and do more and more things. But the so what is that people are not natively interested in the data. And if you go to them and say, hey, this is more private, they don't care. Mm-hmm. I'm serious, and it's a real shame, but they don't. But if you go and say to them, I can keep you alive, they go, I'll go for a bit of that.
Yeah. So let me switch to Craig back on that real quick. So on that insight, you actually reconfigured the product based on that insight. For example, push the password, the alias managers up, the data manager down, just because of the timing of that.
Yes. Yeah.
And can you explain it?
Yeah, it's accurate. And maybe just a high level overview of our product, Pocket Geek Privacy, which is the latest addition to the Pocket Geek family. As I talked about our lines of business earlier, we have Pocket Geek Mobile, Pocket Geek Home, Pocket Geek Cloud, Pocket Geek Privacy now, Pocket Geek Auto. They are all meant to enable, again, our core business of protection and expand that relationship with the consumer in a more tangible way than insurance, which is typically an intangible experience. So Pocket Geek Privacy at a high level, there's 4 components, 4 primary managers. It includes a password manager. And if you listen to a lot of discussion over the last couple of days, you might lead you to believe that passwords are already in the 6-foot hole in the ground, but I don't think we're ready to start shoveling the dirt on those just yet. I think there's a place for those, and these things take time, right? And there's a transition that needs to happen. For those who've been in the mobile industry for a long time, you may remember that mobile payments was just around the corner for 15 years before we actually got to that corner and made that turn. So these things take time to propagate. We believe in it. We believe where that's going, certainly. But primarily today is password manager, the email alias manager, and the combination of those things, how they work together to allow you to create unique and secure credentials with each and every one of your online accounts. So you have a one-to-one relationship in your digital world that has a lot of benefits that to the consumer to help them protect themselves digitally. And the alias email address, as example, allows you to manage your inbox. So, we talked about the spam, continues to be a problem. Those, depending on what study you look at, it's either right around 50%, a little over 50% of all email traffic is spam, right? A tool like this allows you to take control of your email inbox and eliminate that spam. You just turn them off. They can send all the email they want. You never see it. right? So that's sort of the primary components, and that's why.
And to that point,
helped push that up.
you're not, when you've learned to sell it, you don't go and say, hey, get an email manager. You say you don't like spam.
Yes, exactly.
Right, and that goes to what Julian was saying, right?
Which is about catching their interest. And I think one of the things you said yesterday resonated, which is, fear factor is a short-term sort of motivator. There has to be value in the long term to actually go beyond that. But so those are the two components. Then it has a tracker manager to help you manage, cookies, block cookies, what cookies can follow you at a site level, global level, category level. And then it has the data manager element that also allows you to own a copy of your data that you leave behind in your digital trail. I picked up several terms today. That's one of them I got from you earlier, of owning a copy of your data versus owning your data, because there is a distinction there that matters. And so that's kind of the high level, combination, and it's all together in a single product that works, again, across operating systems, cross-platform, mobile, web, again, indifferent to the platform that you're on. And so those insights, like you said, helped us focus some, on the problem being solved for the consumer with email, for example, and then some of the upside of, knowing what data you left with what company as you managed your digital life, even down to the level of what day and what time you left that data to support that, overall value proposition.
So it's really fascinating. So research like this will help everyone. Multi-billion-dollar company making decisions on their product strategies and how they position it. Entrepreneurial startup company that is helping transform and guide an entire industry. And Barbara, I kind of want to end with this. I mean, what's it been like for you working with various industry executives to guide and help get these insights for the global research? And talk to us about that.
Always fascinating. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. Always fascinating. I think what I always try to do is stay objective and represent the consumer, the user, because there will be things that individual companies can't see, for example, because you're looking at obviously your product, your niche in the market, but there are some other insights that do need to be surfaced. And I think one of them is around...
I think you need to press the button on your handle there. Yeah, there's a little button on the side.
Is that working? Is that working?
It's on, please.
Okay.
I think one of the questions the study raises for me is around the messenger. Who is the messenger for the education that needs to happen? Because from a consumer point of view, a user perspective, they're probably hearing a lot of different messages, and it's not surprising that the number one barrier to taking action is around it's just too expensive, and I don't understand what's out there. Who is cutting through all of that from a user perspective to kind of say, this is what actually the risks are for you, this is what you need to do, and we're on your side.
Yeah.
I think that's for me what I try to bring a little bit.
Yeah, and so on that note, let's kind of wrap this panel up, and I just want to leave you all with this one note. This has been a global collaborative effort by many companies, many players, and you're welcome to join us. We'll be doing the night study this summer and fielding it early next year, and please get involved and help us continue these insights globally.
I'll just say, I've been looking and been involved for 8 years and see there's very few studies that have that history.
Yeah.
And it may be 60 pages when it comes out, but it's worth a few hours of your time.
Yeah.
Absolutely, without even a shadow of a doubt.
Yes, 100% agreed.
Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate it.